everyone. It's Dr. Matt Stranick. Good to be with you here for the 16th episode of the Ed Non-Tech podcast. Joining, as ever, is the esteemed and excellent Dr. Doug right beside me here.
Hello, welcome from PEI, the unceded and traditional home of the Mi'kmaq people.
Yes, and I'm, as ever, in Kamloops, BC, located within Secwepemcúlecw, in the unceded traditional home of the Secwepemc people, where teaching and learning have taken place since time immemorial. And I would just like to say that, in observance of kind of these enhanced, acknowledgments or whatnot that we've been trying to establish within the show, I did, spend a few minutes. I keep going back to this Secwepemc People, Land and Laws book. And I guess sort of what's kind of compelling that is seasonally, we're getting some very interesting weather here. And I kind of, when I'm outside and I'm around, I actually, take whatever part of the book that I'm reading right now, of this book, and sort of just apply it. So for instance, now we've kind of gone through some weather that was very, unseasonably warm, I want to say. And so there's almost no snow here now, but now we've kind of hit a cold snap where it's just kind of frozen up and it's bright and cold and there's almost no snow. And I don't know if that portends the end of the winter as such as it can around here. But yeah, anyway, so that's just kind of what's been on my mind lately in terms of locating myself in some things that I've been kind of doing to check in with the surrounding environs with me. So thanks for listening to that, everybody. And Doug, what about you, man? Do you want to speak to your recent illness at all?
Yeah, I want to thank you for your patience and the listeners for their patience, because I just spent a week with COVID and a week kind of recovering from COVID after that, and that was very unpleasant. I
lived down to the advertising, did it? Like as bad as it's been advertised, or like
I didn't end up in the hospital, but holy smokes, there was a while there it felt like a train had, maybe the train didn't hit me, but it knocked me on my butt. That's for darn sure.
Well, I'm sorry you had to hear that, and I'm glad that you are in fact up for today's endeavor, the 16th episode. And you chose a really interesting topic to me, Doug, and I think it's very, timely to say the least, and I'm completely down with it. I'd be interested to hear from you, your take on the topic, because I haven't actually said what the topic is yet. And then B, just what kind of brought that to your mind right now?
I always have a nit to pick about assessment, and the topic is assessment. Why are we doing this to people? And by people, I mean everybody. I mean, why are we doing it to students? Why are we doing it to teachers? Why are we doing it to the whole school system? Like, why are we doing this?
So if I can just ask, first of all, again, like I said, awesome, compelling topic. So are you suggesting that all forms of assessment are inherently problematic? I know that's not what you're saying, but can you just drill down and delineate that? Because you're sort of putting it seems from the title that you're sort of putting a negative light on assessment in general. So if you could just sort of, elaborate.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. I don't care about assessment. I care about students learning.
Okay.
And those are two different things, right? Like, is it a formative assessment? Is it summative assessment? We can have that conversation.
Yeah.
But I do not care what grade any student gets. I don't care. I want them to learn.
Okay. So can I just then interject and ask
Absolutely.
if we're making a differentiation here then between assessment, formative, summative, as you've described, and evaluation? Because I tend to think of like evaluation as being, where we would sort of put in practices like high stakes exams and, those really kind of odious practices which we go up against. When we talk about assessment, I sort of think, well, there's a point to be made in as much as anybody who's putting assessment before teaching, or as like the primary objective of teaching, I think it's a question of emphasis. But if that's sort of like, if your goal as an educator is in fact to award grades, if that's kind of what you see a key function of your role as being, and that informs, not just the evaluation pieces, but how you lead up to that, which is what I think assessment tends to encompass, right? Like, graded and ungraded forms of assessment. But again, it's like you said before in this episode, Doug, if you see, every problem, or in this series, if you see every problem as a nail, then every solution is going to be a hammer, or,
Yeah.
You see what I'm getting at there, bud?
Yeah. I do. So can you tell me what you think evaluation is as compared to assessment? I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
No, man. Okay, so my working, concept of it tends to be, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to that, is evaluation as the practice of giving grades. Sitting down and taking various activities, and through the process of awarding a grade, it becomes something which goes from observing, and so I would argue assessment includes evaluation, but evaluation does not, is actually fairly limited. I think assessment includes like anything you are observing and then using that observation as an engagement point with students. So like, for instance, if I'm having students do like a peer critique of one another's writing, just for instance, there's no grades. The point would be to just sort of say what you find lacking and where there can be improvements. That's an assessment. Whereas if you start putting A, B, and C and whatever on that, that's where I think evaluation happens. Again, does that sound reasonable, or like?
Okay, I understand where you're coming from. So yeah, I like those. I like that definition. That works.
It's really more of a conceptual hash through. There's no definition there to be had, I don't think. But I just, through my experience and just through things that I've read. But again, like I said, I think your position here is compelling. Like I said, any educator who's looking at their primary endeavor as to award students grades so that they can get credit for academic work, I mean, that is assessment and evaluation minded. It's putting the cart before the horse. It's doing everything backwards. I mean, I sort of look at it as if, we live in a world where grades have to be awarded in order to facilitate interactions, beyond the scope of the university itself. But if you're sort of, anyway, I'm out of my depth when I start talking about this stuff. So
that's fine, man. You have a terminal degree in education, so I don't think you're out of your depth in any of this stuff.
I definitely, it's because I have a terminal degree in education that I know where my limits are. And if you want to talk to the scholarship and practice of, of evaluation and assessment as a thing, that's a completely deep body of study and a completely different thing than what I've focused on within my career. So again, this is just kind of my, if you will, ad hoc, bricolage, constructivist-minded notion of what this is. Now, that may be, at odds with how a lot of people see the endeavor and, choose to pursue it, which is fine. Mine is just one voice among dozens and hundreds of other voices. So again, thanks for the opportunity to speak to this, bud. But I feel like I've been doing way too much of the talking. I mean, you got the COVID, you got the COVID throat, which we'll maybe put it on that. But I will say that some of your notes here are very compelling and caused me to kind of do some internet rabbit hole stuff, which I don't want to sort of leave out. So maybe we'll just speak to your list.
Just before we do that,
sure.
I need to compliment you on the answer you just gave me. It's one thing that I just love when I talk to people that know what they're talking about.
Oh no, I'm not one of them. I'm
But
not,
you
man.
are,
Don't
because
mistake me
you
for one
said,
of
here's
those.
the line, here's what I'm comfortable with, here's what I'm still learning about.
Man, okay,
It's
so
like,
that's
thank God,
yeah.
that's so open and wonderful to deal with.
I'm just like I've actually been thinking about this, and I don't even know why it entered my mind. But okay, so we're going down the rabbit hole now, and
Sure.
I'll just during my time at Ontario Tech University, for 3 years that I was there, one of my parts of my portfolio that I enjoyed and which didn't get nearly as much traction as I would have hoped was sort of being a consultant for academic departments as they prepared for their annual curricular renewal process.
Right.
Right. And at one point, I mean, I was literally just at the process of finishing up my doctorate. And one of those sort of final, things as they're sort of, getting you out the door is, really don't speak to things you don't know about if you can help it. And everybody's going to be like, yeah, you doctor, whatever, wannabe people are full of gas. But I mean, honestly, University of Calgary drilled that in. And so then I, go into this curricular process and, with engineers, like nuclear engineers and people for that unit. And they're just, again, subject matter experts up to here, right? And I'm coming in just like, I think it's important that we establish what our terms are first before we get too far into this. And then that we should probably make sure the line is drawn between, knowledge and what we don't know, dividing that, what we're going to speak to and what we're not going to speak to. And their eyes some of them just glazed over, man. They're just like, just give me the Excel sheet and tell me what to do. And, from their standpoint, I get it. It's like, so this is why you spend more time in the field, you gain more credibility, and you can have a conversation based on your own friggin' profile. And so this is where the academic ego kind of thing, like, I never see that at the college level, never. But at the university level, it just seems like, man, everything seems like some kind of contest, politically oriented and whatever. Like almost as soon as you go in the room in some cases. A lot of the time it's not like that, but there's enough things on it where I'm just like, man, this is symptomatic of the culture of higher ed generally that lives down to the stereotypes. So anyway, dude, so I just totally took us into the weeds. So do you want to speak to Bersta here? Your first service here, bud? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's Baista. I'm not really sure.
Baista. Sorry, I'm like reading it from a distance, and I was like, I was thinking I could use a coffee now, and I was thinking barista, and anyway. Yeah. Okay.
It's all good, but it's
good education in an age of measurement. Please, that's a very good title for an
and
article.
It's what we're doing right now. It's about measurement.
Yep.
Measurement does not mean that all the students are learning. Right. And since measurement becomes the most important thing, that influences practice. It has to. So when we take a look at it and we're saying things like, okay, all the policy comes down to that number that student got, or worse, that number that school got, what are we doing? We are now teaching to that number rather than teaching the students.
Okay.
And it's not about student learning. It's about coming up with that number.
As an unemployed person, I have an interview in the next couple of weeks at one of the universities in Canada that ranks really, really well in the Maclean's rankings. And part of me is like, what a load of hogwash. But then part of me is like, yeah, they've been sitting at number one in this category for like 28 out of 32 years. And I'm just kind of like, pat myself on the back, even though I don't want to be. It's like when I was doing my, my thesis, my doctoral thesis, and the predominant site for my research was within a MOOC on edX that was being put on by Harvard University. And a professor from Harvard who happened to have a background from Calgary, energy science, basically saw me and sympathized. God bless your soul, sir. So it's like when I'm on and you've done very well in academics. You've gotten very good grades. I've gotten very good grades, and like I'm in a position where I can say, yeah, this is kind of, let's go for a better way. But then on the other side, I'm totally benefiting from it, from the way that things have played out up until now. So I don't want to be like sort of po-faced and just sort of say, well, I advocate for these practices, even though I'm benefiting very well from these others. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
For
Okay.
sure. Because like my grades in high school were not wonderful in grade 12.
Mine were abysmally bad. It sucked until I scraped into university. And then I scraped into university and, my life changed a lot because of that. Thank goodness, I was suited to it. But yeah, I mean, okay, so we're talking about things that disincentivize interest in further education. Man, the quantification and hierarchy and stratification as a social, sorting mechanism. So now, just because it's in the reference list, I'll just give a shout out to my person, Paulo Freire. I've gotten through all the introductory material of this book, and I'm actually now into the sections where he's been writing. And it's just one of these things where every few paragraphs, I just have to kind of put it down and let it resonate in my brain, just because it's such that it is kind of like reading poetic stuff that's also really philosophically minded. And he's somebody who has advocated very strongly, as we talked about on the show, to state the perfectly obvious about Mr. Freire, is, in advocating for the emancipatory and upward, potential of enhancing people's lives through the radical act of education. So when I sort of position myself as somebody who wants to go in that direction, again, it's not about achieving perfection. It's just that's where I want to kind of position myself more closer to that with on the spectrum, right? So that aligns, I think, really well with what you're talking about here, in as much as the focus should be how to benefit the individual and the collective endeavor vis-a-vis education. So
yes. And I just want to put a spoiler alert out to new listeners. If you don't like Paulo Freire, stop listening, because that's our bias. We both love them.
Well, stop listening for a minute and then go and actually read,
read some stuff and then come back.
And then come back. We don't want to close the door. It's just like, so yeah, this is a thing where we're going to put our constructivist leanings out there. I think we've done enough of this, these episodes where we kind of speak to our biases. We are living proof of our biases at all moments, and we definitely hope to be challenged on these. So if you're somebody who's listening and you want to put something in the comments on the WordPress site or on the YouTube clip, or God help you on the Spotify or Apple thing where you locate this, I won't see those comments, but Doug might. So just we're putting forward our stuff, I think, in a respectful way, and we just hope that you're willing to engage. But as Doug says, Freire, we're very much Team Freire. I mean, I'm wearing a Raptors scarf on their game today, but if there was a Freire scarf to be had, maybe I just need to get one from his part of Brazil. Anyway, so dude, that was very awesome. Now, one of the topics that sort of came up in your notes as I was scanning through that kind of jumped out at me was this notion of unlearning. And and that resonates with me because that, every time it comes up in any professional or academic thing that I've been part of in the past while, I'm like, I really need to go down this rabbit hole a little bit more. So I did, but I've spoken to that. I will be speaking to that primarily in the notes, and I don't want to monopolize all of our time on this particular episode. But can we just digress enough to speak to that and where you found it and how it contributed to your notes?
Okay, my little image, so much to unlearn.
Right.
And I'm looking at what assessment is now, or evaluation, I guess, or the measurement culture that we've got in education.
Yep.
And we've gone so far down the road Why did we head this way? We got to turn around. We know better. We got to unlearn a bunch of this stuff.
So
because we're almost like just, somebody's brainwashed us to say this is what matters.
yeah, no, that is like fits my revolutionary and punk rock middle class bourgeoisie position very well, petite bourgeoisie position very well. But so where that led me, and I'll just snapshot some of these.
Please do, yeah.
You know, so I just I knew that unlearning actually is a thing beyond just something that Doug has sort of coined within the context of the show. So I just punched in a few choice references here for unlearning. So one of them's learn, unlearn, and relearn. What you get, what got you here won't get you there, by Dr. Maggie Worrell. Within an educational leadership context. She wrote that for Forbes, so that rich people publication, and it was sort of written
Right.
post-COVID, like immediate. It's from 2020, so it's 6 months into COVID, and just talking about what leadership looks like after COVID. In the wake of these distributed learning environments and such, which have largely been part of what's changed. What you and I are involved in. So I threw that in there, and then when I just put in unlearning assessment, I got language assessment and literacy, which is close to my heart, which is written for language testing, sort of an ESL-oriented journal,
Yeah.
which I'll link to because I'm an ESL educator from way back. And then some cool stuff in Erodol, the Athabasca publication.
Yeah, Athabasca one, yeah.
Which kind of zips into very, very like specific work site, kind of study stuff. Again, in terms of breaking from established practice. Anyway, there's I think that's it. There may be one or two other things, but
what I'm hearing is we need to do an episode or two on this, because this is a concept we both care about.
Yeah, well, I just think like I'm a sucker for catchphrases and God help me
Yeah.
hashtags. Lord help us all. But when my ears prick up when something has jumped out across multiple contexts, which carry
Yes.
similar connotations within that context. And then he passed the mic to Doug.
Yeah. So I'm just going to talk about the Broadfoot and Black article.
Please. Yeah.
And basically what they're saying. They're saying a lot of interesting stuff, but it's the lament of why have we headed down this avenue? Why are we an assessment society? Like, I remember when I did my undergrad education, it was labeled jars, not people.
Oh.
And what grades are labeling, right? Oh, you're a 70 student, you're a 90 student, you're an A student, you're a D student. Like, what are we doing? How are we getting there? And they're talking about how the 90s really saw an uptick in this, and how by now, like, it's crazy.
Well, so again, I would just sort of defer earlier to what I was sort of saying about my sort of mental cleavage between evaluation and assessment. But generally speaking, I agree with the flow that you're on here, and it certainly ties into what I consider like destructive neoliberal educational policies, including but not limited to No Child Left Behind in the United States, right? Where there's no room for recognizing that certain jurisdictions, just because of like literally the postal code that they're in or the zip code that they're in, are historically and culturally completely disadvantaged at participating meaningfully in that way. Socioeconomic factors, right? And again, that's exactly the kind of thing that Mr. Freire, when in the introductory material, the 3 essays that are there, neoliberal hegemony is like one of the harmful, destructive activities within the past 20 or 30 years, and 30, 40 years probably at this point. And anyway, Doug, thank you for bringing all of this to the surface vis-a-vis your inquiry here, dude.
Oh, you're welcome. Glad to do it.
Yeah.
So, so the whole concept of we know we're here. It's how did we get here? We got to turn around. We got to unlearn and go back. We know better than this.
Okay.
But trying to do the U-turn and head in a different direction is just painful, which is the Williamson et al. Article.
Well,
Payne and Shea.
Yeah,
and intensification of measurement. Like, I just love that phrase. It's like, yeah, that's all that matters. It's what's the number going to be?
It's deferring to the base tendencies of contemporary society, which ultimately, wherein everything that can be conceptualized as a, commodity is done so, right? And the acquisitive model where, things just, you store things up, and it's just for you and the people around you. I think, this kind of thing, speaks to that and, potentially draws into that. Now, again, I don't want to be a pedant about rhetoric or anything, but I think, it's you can't just sort of wake up one day and be like, I'm going to tear everything down. I'm going to do everything different. But I think, folks, visit your local teaching and learning center for,
yes.
The opportunity to learn about, things where you can sort of act on learning what's going on in your class, have meaningful, active learning opportunities at whether it's a small seminar or a larger class, and your local, teaching and learning folks, that's what their job is, to help get you to the point where it doesn't just have to be about doing the grade. If you feel uncomfortable about that, you can still promote and build knowledge, build and promote community without, necessarily having to have some kind of punitive kind of evaluation piece on it, right? So yeah, shout out to all the people like Carolyn Ives and all those others who work at teaching centers for the awesome work that you do. Honestly, I mean, not to give I love teaching centers, man. That was like a pivotal moment in my career where I got to spend some time working on one. So anyway.
I have loved every center of teaching and learning, or every learning commons, or every cafe, center for academic excellence, academic faculty excellence, whatever it's called.
Yep.
Those people, they're there to help, and they do. I have had just loud conversations with them.
Yeah.
Nope, I think you're wrong, and here's why. And then you have that back and forth, but it's respectful, and it's about how do we help the students? And for me, the biggest thing I could say about somebody is they have the soul of an educator. That is a compliment, right? Like, some people are not trained educators, but they want to make sure those students learn. Other people are in classrooms, but their expertise is whatever, not teaching. And
well, their priority. And again, you can say, well, maybe those people had, a bad experience, in certain aspects of it. But then the other hand is, if you're in a position where you're in public sector higher ed, then again, you've done well by the thing, right? So I think it's in your interest, if part of your mandate as an educator, which I think it should be, to democratize and open up things and give opportunities to people, would be to, put on display not just sort of a set of, blunt and sharp instruments, as it were, but the spectrum, as it were, of things that you can do in a learning situation other than being led by this notion. And at the end of it, everybody had to get, a transcript, right? I see your vibe there, man. And
a lot of this is, there's two types of people in the world. There's people that go through stuff and say, I don't want anybody else to have to go through that.
Yep.
And then there's people that go through stuff and they think I went through it, so everybody else should have to.
Ha.
And there's that difference. So when it becomes well, that's how I was taught, and it's like, so what?
They were successful at it, to get to their knowledge, curator kind of role.
Yep.
And they want to replicate that in as much as bringing themselves forward within respective careers. But then probably, it's in the minds like, it worked for me. Why doesn't it work for you? And it's like, if you recognize that you can do better and that want to do better, at least in the interest of making your practice more contemporary, at least in that interest of keeping up, check in with the Writing Center. And just again, while we're on the tangent, not while we're on the tangent, this is actually pretty good stuff here. But I'm going to just throw in, I'm reading on ebook. You can't see this.
Oh, can't see that.
No, you can't. But I'm reading on ebook. I've been reading about Southern California punk bands and labels.
Oh, okay.
And there's this author, Jim Rulin. So he wrote a book about the SST Records, this major influential indie band or record label. Now he has also co-authored a book with the band Bad Religion, who's this long-running punk band from the mid 80s up until early 80s, all the way up until present day. And one of the singer for the band has a PhD in anthropology and is like, on staff at like Stanford University as an adjunct. And he tours the world, with this really well-grossing international rock band. So again, this is a case where something which is like, as esoteric and culturally specific as, say, a certain type of guitar music, you're taking two things that wouldn't necessarily belong together and putting them together in such a way that you never know how it's going to go with individual people who encounter that, whether it's at a concert venue or at a lecture hall. I did so much bending over and twisting to sort of work that in and make that slightly relevant. So now I can put, Dr. Greg Graffin, PhD,
nice.
on the reference list. Although I'll be putting Rulin's book, not him. But anyway.
So I'm going to jump back into the Williamson article for just 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Because you have ed non-tech in our title of this podcast. So have you ever used a Scantron?
Oh my good. Okay. My experience is as an elementary and junior high school students, filling in the bubbles with, and they pass you out the pencils, and I it's like, okay, I'm a consumer of education in this period in history. It's just one thing that the teacher asks you to do, and you don't think about it. Never have I ever had to punch them into the machine and or do evaluation with them. So is that where you're going, bud?
That's where I was headed. I had a very spirited conversation with somebody who said the Scantron is the only machine I need. And I'm like, so you don't want to check your questions? You don't want to? Nope, don't want to. All I need is the Scantron. It's like, well, what if it breaks? Well, then I can't teach. This class is unteachable. And I'm like, well, no, that's not even close to true. You don't want to teach it, but the Scantron is not the be all and end all. There's absolute value to the Scantron. I absolutely get it. And when it becomes the most important tool in your toolkit, you got issues, and your poor students have more issues.
Well, so on the one hand, I can think of it like, so he's doing like multi-part formative assessment, and he's doing all this dynamic lecturing and all this like cool active stuff using just like, the analog elements of the, but I'm like, this is probably a person who stands there and just reads out of the textbook and then has the students do the comprehension and things at the end of the chapter, maybe, and then gives them out, right? I don't want to make negative things about somebody whose practice I literally know nothing about besides what you described. But again, people tend to see what they're comfortable seeing. And, if people are comfortable in their livelihoods, as a teacher or a professor or whatever, and your primary goal is to just replicate that comfort and success further, then of course you may not be inclined to move past the Scantron. I get it. If you're insecure about your thing, or you just you everything else in your life is not about your job, and you don't want to devote the mental energy to it. I mean, I'm willing to see where people come from with this, and I'm willing to hopefully work with them to try and. It's not about, you don't have to radicalize your whole approach. It's just like one or two small things, that can make some changes, and just see how it goes. Just give it a try. On behalf of your teaching and learning center, your local teaching and learning center. Anyway, so
yeah, that should be the tag for this episode.
one of them, definitely. So you got some cool illustrations here, as always, my dude.
I'm not totally down on assessment, even though I've described some stuff. There is upside.
Oh no, man. Taking a critical position is not harmful, because if you're an academic or even just somebody who knows how to read, then you're going to read the rest of it. It's a good lead. It's a good thing to draw people in and get them interested, and then from which point you can have a substantive conversation. So I think you're not doing a bait and switch. I don't think you're misrepresenting yourself. I think that this is just you start with the critical position and then you work through it, right? So
yeah,
it's good, man. Yeah.
And part of when people talk about assessment, it's almost always the impact on the students, what the students are doing. And the first image that I shared is J.R.R. Tolkien, right? Probably the most famous, well-known prof in the world. Probably. And the whole little story is from an interview that he did, because he was like at Oxford or whatever forever, and he was a hardcore academic. Yeah. And he said he's marking this paper, it's hot outside, and he's got this stack on his desk. Then he gets to a page and it's empty. There's nothing on the page for him to mark. And he was going to give bonus points just because it was an empty page and he didn't have to mark it. And then he scribbled, "In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit." And that's from the Lord of the Rings. That whole Lord of the Rings world, right? That's where the Hobbit came from.
Wow.
And so he had that little bit of space doing the drudgery of this marking. Yeah. And then presto, something amazing came out of it.
I'm telling you, man, like I've been an adjunct where like during my summer break from my job as a teacher, I was like at, a university, like staying in like on site at the university, even though it was a distance-based class with my family, and they're trying to have summer vacation. And I'm like finishing up my PhD program, or my EdD program rather, as well as, being on vacation from a regular job. And I'm just like teaching these courses, and I'm just sitting there sweating. It's July, my family is there, and I'm sitting there just with a bottle of beer, trying. It's like, I value what I'm doing, and I want, to be a good educator through this medium. But part of me at the time was just sort of like, I need to get these marked. I need to get these marked, so that I can, have an hour with my kids or my wife before I crash for the night, and then I'm going to get up and do the whole thing the next day again. It was not the most awesome summer. And the thing that was leading through my mind was, when I can get these grades submitted to the registrar, then I can relax, and I was inadvertently supporting the unsustainable overwork and underpay and all the negative things about exploitative contract post-secondary culture that we talk about on this show. But not everybody can be cavalier about it. It's just like, I need that to support my family and whatever. So, but again, there's better ways. There are other ways. It doesn't have to be like, just you can make some small choices that are different, and just see where they go, right?
One of the things I did years ago is I was killing myself marking.
Yeah.
Right? Like I was teaching like 4 or 5 classes a semester, and I'm putting in all the stuff, and I was like, I would have like a half page of feedback for every student on every assignment, and then I just said, "Does anybody read this?" And the students are like, "No, we only care what the number is." So I changed it to, if you want, my comment became, "If you want more info, please let me know. Otherwise, here's your grade." And I had about 5 students across the next couple of years that say, "Can you give me more feedback?" And then I could dig in and give them heaps of feedback, but I wasn't spending 7 hours marking this one assignment for this one class anymore.
Right. And I mean, as somebody who's taught writing, for, it's just like, you really, anybody of good spirit, I think, wants to like justify,
Yep.
So again, you're sort of participating in the cart coming before the horse, the grade coming before the mechanical process.
Yes.
So where you're dealing with something complicated, some very highly nuanced, thoughtful phenomena, such as a writing assignment or whatever kind of assignment, whatever kind of thing you have to put your friggin' rubber stamp on as an adjudicator of public funds, as a civil servant, essentially. You're
Yep.
doing your diligence to the public purse by substantiating your grades. I like your notion here of just you look it over, you give it you got your rubric or whatever, and then like in the interest of this largely performative action, here's where it goes based on your critical professional expertise, and then if you want the annotated version, and so then when the request comes in for the annotated version, you can annotate it to the level that it deserves, rather than having all your mental bandwidth and creativity taxed to where you're doing all, and I think comments are probably of higher quality than you would be given otherwise, right? So this is some good stuff, man. You've got an interesting out here.
I taught at one of the times I was a sessional was at Athabasca University.
Okay.
And I had a student say, "Please give me more feedback. I need more feedback on my writing because you."
Yeah.
And so I took 2 paragraphs of this student's writing and I dissected it, and I dug in and said, "There's this and this and this and this and this," and there was like 19 points I made on this guy's 2 paragraphs.
It's nice to be able to take a deep dive on that stuff from time to time. It's really,
Then he called me because we were doing it by email. He called and I'm like, "Oh man, he's pissed off," and he wasn't. He was like, "Thank you so much. Nobody has ever taken the time to explain this to me. Now I understand what other profs have meant when they said this about my writing." They said, I can't believe you dissected it like that. And it's like, yeah, I've got a doctorate, right? I put the time and effort into learning this stuff. And he was so thankful. Like it was, when you get those nice letters from people, I save all mine. I have a little Google Docs folder of every nice thing somebody sent me. I
That's
put
awesome.
someplace just to make myself feel good, because mental health is mental health and anxiety is anxiety and all the rest.
Totally, man. Totally. I hear you.
So it worked for me. The majority of students just don't care. Did I get a passing grade? Fine. Especially the ones that don't care what their grade is, right? I need an 80 to graduate. Okay. 81's fine. Don't care.
Well, I mean, there's a lot to be said, whether you're in a teaching situation or a faculty development situation, about meeting people where they are.
Yes.
And going from there. So it sounds like, within that context, you basically called out, the practice for what it is. You didn't cast, negatively on the practice. You supported the mandate of the institution in doing your diligence to do the assessment and valuation. And then you provided individualized opportunities for multiple feedback and support. So yeah, and just by the way, your local writing center thanks you for what you did, because my connection at TRU currently is such that I still volunteer with the writing center twice a week, couple hours a week, or yeah, a couple hours a week, and it's just awesome. It lets me stay in the game as an English teacher, which has been kind of a formative part of my life for quite a while. So yeah, thanks for that, Doug. Cool, man. So well, what else we got here? Like in terms of illustrations, we've already sort of spoken to the unlearning one.
Yeah, the one with the two old guys with the top hat. That's my favorite one. That was the one that made me laugh the most.
Do you happen to know the artist? Because that's actually a really nice impressionist painting, I think.
I have no idea. I know somebody named Cheesy La Vida put the meme together. So,
well, it's an effective painting and it's an effective meme. Are you going to be part of the problem or solution? Definitely
the problem.
I feel, yeah. Anyway, I know that I've been part of the problem. I know that I've remained part of the problem. Dudes named Matt, just have caused, it's like if you go to Thailand and you run into, a Westerner, person who is like 33% chance if it's a guy, their name's going to be Matt. Just guarantee it. Like, or anywhere in Asia, it's like, I'm living down to my, stereotypes, man. It's all I can do. So that's dope. I enjoy that one, man.
It just reminded me when I was a teacher.
Yeah.
Because we went into a staff meeting one day, because we had like staff meetings the third Thursday of the month or whatever. Like every month there's a staff meeting. Most of it is just the download, the principal just blah blah blahs, and you sit there. And one time we went into the staff meeting and I sat down and I had like really good friends on staff with me, and they sat across the room. And I'm like, what's going on? These seats are empty. And they're like, no, Doug, we
you're a liability, man.
And I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, no, man, shit splatters. Right? If we sit next to you, we know you're going to get it because you're going to say something. And then we're going to get in trouble too. So we're going to sit way over here so you can just get in trouble all by yourself. And that's that whole, this was rhetorical, I have ideas thing. It's like, yeah, because every time the principal said something that was complete BS, I'm like, no, that's not true. That's not accurate, and that's not reasonable. And so every staff meeting was the same. And then I became the union rep, and that happened to have the union meetings at the same time, and he was happy to see me gone. It's like, yeah, you go to that union meeting. I don't want you on my meeting anymore, because I called him on everything, because that was the kind of person he
There's no glory in it, but again, on behalf of post-secondary workers everywhere, I appreciate your service, sir. Honestly, in that regard, or that was elementary for you, right? But still,
yeah, that was a K-9 school, so
still reflective of the university thing. It doesn't change. Hierarchy is hierarchy. Workplace politics are workplace politics, man.
Yeah.
And so who do we got here? Is that Heidi of the Swiss Alps? Who is that?
That's that.
Excuse me, from The Sound of Music, right?
The Sound of Music, yeah.
So
look at all these projects and papers I haven't started, right? It just goes back to what we're doing to teachers and educators, and it's like, why is it taking this long? It's crazy. At the end of my first year of teaching, like I'm halfway through June, right? And just exhausted. And the marks have already gone in, right? Like we had to have our marks in by like June the 4th or June the 7th or whatever for the report cards. But I was still assigning stuff and I was still marking stuff. And a more experienced teacher walked in and it's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, I'm marking this stuff. And they're like, why? The marks are already in. You can't record this anywhere. It doesn't go anywhere. What are you doing? And then they basically, they made the move of, just swipe it all off into the trash. The students don't want it back. There's no point. This is never getting recorded anywhere. What are you doing? And it was.
It's more like it's fulfilled its both educational and administrative purpose, as much as it could have done so.
Yeah.
And into the recycling bin, I hope, is where that went. maybe the trash.
I don't know if they had recycling bins in schools
back in the day.
Back in the day.
Okay, well.
But I just put it in because it's like, what are we doing? And I thought about it. I hadn't matured enough as an educator. I was just doing it because isn't that what you're supposed to do? That's not a good enough reason to do anything.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of people who enter, I think, any profession where if they can sort of gain as much as of the minimal technical performance and, whatever standards, it's just like, it's sort of like the difference between you go in because you're passionate about something versus you go in to just get the check. And if you're just kind of interested to protect your paycheck, cover your back, and live a ripple-free life, then the prescription of just assessment, measurement, evaluation, quantification, that all provides, various kind of inputs to the administrative element. So there's a lot of incentives to following that approach. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
There's security and there's the untroubled life of somebody who doesn't have to, justify anything beyond the results of the assessment and evaluation procedures. So it's a shame, man. It's a shame. We're against it.
Yeah.
This is Matt and Doug, and we're against it.
Yeah, that's basically it. What this episode seems to be.
No, but I think we've had a pretty. Dude, are you okay? Okay.
I'm fine. I've been trying to mute myself as much as possible, but I was laughing that time, so I couldn't mute.
Well, we are drawing, past the 50-minute mark here, and even with the little bits of stuff I'm going to edit out with Camtasia.
Yeah.
You got this really one of those cool, weirdo. Well, I'm trying to describe this image. This the Japanese neurologist image.
I do not know if this is true. Okay. Right? Just came across my social media feed, and it's an image, and it's about, if the image is spinning, then you're really stressed out, or you're really anxious, or whatever. And if the image isn't, then you're really calm. And I can calm myself. Like, I can make that thing spin.
Okay.
So I honestly put it there just because with my color vision, I don't know if I'm missing stuff. So I'm wondering what you see.
Like, okay. So first of all, you were wearing the color correcting or color enhancing specs the other episode, were you not?
Yep.
They're not part of your normal kind of day-to-day kind of wear, or like, are you still kind of ramping up to it, or what's the?
No, they cost like $800, and these cost $28, and these cost $6.
Okay.
So I'm just paranoid I'm going to do something to break them or scratch them or whatever.
Gotcha. Okay, I was curious. So I guess having said that, to me it looks like just basically, gold and purple, and then the ball sort of field that's in the middle there is more of a magenta color, I would wager.
Magenta.
Or like wine colored, generic red wine color within this sort of matrix that's created with the, so I guess part of it is, do you see it as a background with, the purple elements on it, or do you see the purple elements as the background with like a lattice of, yellowish, golden, whatever graphic over it? Like, is it, which one's on top of the other?
It depends when it's moving. If it's moving, it's really obvious.
Yeah, see, I just, to me, it's a completely static image. It could not be more static for me. So
that is Awesome. You are doing well.
And so are the microbrew companies in my area. That's what I'm going to say. It's like, with Jamin, it's like, yeah, I make a point of having an untroubled mind because until very recently, I was the opposite of that. So it's only through the intentional and purposeful efforts, not just of drinking, but of sort of putting my thoughts into order such that the spinnies and the voices like, well, you should be doing this and this and this. It's like, I've finally, after much work, sort of not gotten rid of them because you can never get rid of that shit, but sort of tamed it to the point where my internal monologue flows with the rest of everything else. And yeah, I see a static image and yeah, anyways, man.
Good for you.
I appreciate
Good for you.
Yeah. What an unintended way, what an interesting way to end the show. I think you put a very nice cap on this, my man. So is there anything else we want to sort of speak to here? I think we covered, oh, go ahead.
Only two quick little things. One was the word of the podcast was going to be datification because it was from one of the references, and I didn't even say the word, but datification is what we're doing, and it's causing us all that stress. So for any of the listeners, if you go to the site and you see that little image spinning, yeah, datification might be stressing you out without even realize what it is.
Do you? Yeah, that's awesome. Awesome. Sorry, keep going, dude.
And I have a question for the podcast, right? If somebody wants to comment, is more evaluation leading to better education, or is it just better records of what being covered in class? That's what I'm wondering. Like, please give us your opinion. We've kind of shared our opinions.
As a father to a kid who's doing a provincial high school literacy assessment this year, I find this timely, not just in my, talking head video man capacity and whatever else I do, but in real life. I mean, this stuff is, it's not untrue to call it, it's everywhere. I mean, it's so much ingrained as part of the delivery and distribution of public education right now. It's, on the one hand, it's like, it's overemphasizing assessment and evaluation. Yes. But, is it an obvious statement or is it a statement which is a call to action, a call to make changes to it in whatever way? So this is an invitation, if you will, to consider your practice as a teacher, educator, or, whatever capacity you're in, to just sort of look at things as, am I actually taking the moment for the moment? Am I actually doing things in a purposeful way which feel right and are pedagogically sound? Or am I simply trying to get something off my desk so I can, hit the golf course or get on the next plane to, wherever for vacation? It's not that cut and dried, but this is kind of some of the terrain that we covered this episode. So I guess I would just say, Doug, thanks for the awesome topic. Thanks for being brave with your COVID and kind of getting us out here with us. And
there is an upside to COVID, I found.
Do tell.
That's my grad ring, my undergraduate grad ring.
Whoa, which university again, bud? Arcadia. Okay.
Arcadia University.
Oh, gotcha. Yes,
in Wolfville, Nova Scotia. Yeah. And that sucker has been on my finger since before COVID started. And then you spend 2 weeks barely being able to eat, and magically you can get it off your finger now.
Gotcha. It's got a slimming effect. Overall.
It has it's amazing when I'm not just eating cookies and sandwiches and whatever else.
It really forced you off the post holiday track, once and forever for the 2 weeks. So,
yep. So now it's off, and I don't know what to do with my hand. Right, it's been there for years. But that's all I got.
That's like an existential kind of quandary there, dude. And we may even come back to that with the next episode. We'll see.
Absolutely.
I feel like that could be a jumping off point as a metaphor for lots of things. But anyway,
True
okay.
enough.
Well, I'm going to hit the stop button pretty soon here. Just a moment. I'm Matt. This has been the Ed Non-Tech Podcast. And thanks a lot for listening. Drop us a comment if you care to. Share it with your friends or people, conversely, that you are not friends with, that you want to get back at. We appreciate all dissemination and sharing and engagement that we can through the show. Thanks a lot, and I hope you all have a peaceful, restful weekend and the week ahead of you.
Right on. Have fun, everybody.
Take
Thanks for
care.
listening.
Bye-bye.